Welcome to this extraordinary video. Today, we're going to tell you the story of a man who didn't fight battles, but trained the man who conquered the world. A man who never wore a crown, but shaped kings, emperors, scientists, and thinkers for the next 2,000 years. A man who didn't invent machines, but invented how we think about thinking. This is the life-changing, emotional, and inspiring story of Aristotle, the philosopher who taught Alexander the Great, and the mind that built the very foundation of logic, science, politics, ethics, biology, education, and leadership. If you are someone who feels like the world doesn't understand your ideas, wants to learn English by listening to real, powerful stories, dreams of changing the world, not with weapons, but with words and wisdom, then this story is for you. This is not just a biography. This is a journey through pain, passion, power, and purpose. From a curious little boy in northern Greece to the man whose brain became the blueprint of modern civilization. And yes, this video is also great for your English. You will improve your listening skills, your vocabulary, your understanding of history, and most importantly, you'll learn how one person with nothing but questions in his mind changed the world forever. So sit back, focus, and listen with your heart, because now begins the story of the man who taught the world how to think. Part 1. The Curious Boy from Greece. How it all began. Let me take you back. Not 100 years, not 500, but over 2,400 years ago. In a small ancient town called Stagira in northern Greece, a baby was born in the year 384 BC. His name was Aristotle. His father's name was Nicomachus, a doctor. But not just any doctor. He was the personal physician to the king of Macedonia. That meant Aristotle grew up around people of power, medicine, and deep knowledge. He saw how his father used observation, diagnosis, and logic to understand the human body. This made a deep impression on young Aristotle. He didn't play with toys like most kids. He played with questions. He didn't care about games. He cared about how things worked. Even as a small child, he would stare at animals, leaves, clouds, wondering, why does a bird fly? Why does the sun rise? What makes us happy? What is truth? These were not normal thoughts for a child. But Aristotle wasn't born normal. He was born to observe the world deeply, and he would spend his entire life doing just that. But everything changed when he was just a boy. Tragedy struck early. When Aristotle was still a young child, both his mother and father died. We don't know the exact reason, but we do know this. He became an orphan before he could even understand what death meant. That pain of being left alone so early never left him. But instead of becoming bitter, he became obsessed with life. He didn't ask, why me? He asked, what is life? What is death? Why are we here? His relatives took care of him, and eventually he was sent to Athens, the most famous city of learning in the ancient world. And that's where his real journey began. When he was just 17 years old, Aristotle walked into a place that would change his life forever. Plato's Academy. The first real university in history. And at the center of this academy was a man who was already a legend. Plato, the greatest philosopher of his time, and the student of Socrates. Imagine, you are a 17-year-old orphan. You walk into a place filled with the smartest people in the world, and your teacher is a man who studied under Socrates himself. The man who chose to die rather than stop speaking the truth. For Aristotle, this was heaven. For the next 20 years, Aristotle stayed at the academy. He was not just a student. He became the most brilliant student Plato had ever seen. But even though Aristotle loved Plato, he didn't agree with everything. Plato believed in ideal forms, the idea that the real world is just a shadow, and the perfect version of everything exists in another invisible realm. But Aristotle didn't believe that. He believed in what we can touch, see, measure, and test. Plato said, "There's a perfect version of a tree somewhere out there." Aristotle said, "No. This tree right here, let's study it. Let's understand it." He started writing about everything: animals, politics, human behavior, the stars, happiness, the soul. He wasn't trying to win arguments. He was trying to understand everything that exists. He asked millions of questions and wrote thousands of pages, all by hand, with no internet, no electricity, no tools except his brain and a scroll. He was becoming more than just a student. He was becoming a force of knowledge. But then, something unexpected happened. When Plato died, everyone thought Aristotle would take over the academy. But he didn't. Why? Because some believed he was too different. His ideas were too scientific, too rebellious, too challenging to Plato's teachings. And so, even after 20 years of loyalty, dedication, and brilliance, Aristotle was not chosen. It broke his heart. He had lost his second home. So once again, like when he lost his parents, Aristotle had to walk away from something he loved. But this time, he didn't fall into darkness. He began a journey that would take him across the world, and eventually into the life of a boy who would become the most powerful man in history. The academy door had closed behind him. He had given it 20 years of his life. He had studied harder than anyone, questioned everything, and offered his deepest loyalty. But in the end, it wasn't enough. When Plato died, the school needed a new leader, and they didn't choose Aristotle. Why? Because he didn't fit the mold. He didn't blindly follow Plato's ideas. He thought differently. He asked new questions. He wanted more than ideal worlds. He wanted to touch the real one. And for that, he was quietly pushed out. Now, at the age of 37, Aristotle stood at a crossroads. He was homeless. No job, no city, no position. But his mind, it was burning with fire. Aristotle didn't complain. He didn't attack the academy or seek revenge. He simply turned toward the unknown. He believed, if the academy won't hear my voice, the world will. He left Athens behind and began to travel, from city to city, searching not for comfort, but for truth. He believed every place, every animal, every plant, every person carried a lesson, and he would collect them all. Aristotle's first stop was Assos, a city by the sea in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. It was ruled by Hermias, a former student of Plato, and a wise, forward-thinking man who welcomed philosophers like family. Hermias saw the brilliance in Aristotle. He offered him a home, resources, and most importantly, freedom to teach and think. Aristotle began holding lessons under the open sky. He taught not just theory, but real-world thinking, asking students to look, touch, measure, and wonder. It was here that something unexpected happened. Aristotle, the great mind, fell in love. He met Pythias, Hermias' adopted daughter. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and full of questions. Just like him, they married. They had a daughter, also named Pythias. Aristotle, the philosopher of reason, was now also a father and husband. And it changed him. He began writing more about ethics, family, and the balance of love and logic. He started thinking, what is the good life? What makes a human life complete? His heart was full and his mind was expanding. But happiness is rarely safe for long. While Aristotle was building his peaceful world in Assos, the real world was watching. The powerful Persian Empire saw Hermias as a threat. A Greek leader supporting Greek philosophers? Dangerous. They captured Hermias. They tortured him. And then they executed him. Aristotle was devastated. His friend, his mentor, his protector, gone. This was a turning point. Aristotle realized something painful. Even wisdom cannot protect you from the cruelty of power. He wrote a hymn for Hermias, not just in sadness, but in honor. He would carry Hermias's memory with him, wherever he went next. Aristotle moved again, this time to Mytilene, a city on the island of Lesbos. He was older now, wiser, a bit quieter. And here, surrounded by the sea, something new awakened inside him. He became obsessed with life, not just human life, but all life. He studied fish, birds, insects, mammals, the way they moved, the way they mated, the way they gave birth, the way they died. He dissected animals, watched their behavior, drew what he saw, took endless notes. This was the birth of biology, not just ideas, but observation, comparison, classification. He discovered patterns, that dolphins breathe air, that octopuses change color, that chicks form inside eggs, that some fish lay thousands of eggs while others give live birth. No one in history had ever studied nature this closely. While others were worshiping gods, Aristotle was worshiping reality. He was building the first system of scientific knowledge the world had ever seen. Meanwhile, far away in Macedonia, a powerful king was thinking about Aristotle. His name was Philip II, and he had a son. Wild, brilliant, and full of fire. That boy's name was Alexander. Philip wanted his son to learn wisdom before he learned war, so he remembered Aristotle, whose father had once served as royal physician and who was now the greatest living mind in Greece. He sent an invitation. Come to Macedonia. Teach my son. I will give you everything you need. Aristotle said yes. Philip built a special school for Aristotle and Alexander in a quiet place called Mysa, surrounded by nature, trees, flowers, silence. It wasn't a palace. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a garden of thought. Here, Aristotle taught not only Alexander, but a group of young Macedonian nobles who would one day rule the empire with him. He taught them logic, philosophy, politics, ethics, literature, history, geography, medicine, rhetoric, strategy. But most of all, he taught them how to think. He gave Alexander a special copy of the Iliad, the story of the Trojan War, with handwritten notes in the margins. That book became Alexander's Bible during his military campaigns. Alexander was not easy. He was bold, ambitious, and restless. But he respected Aristotle. Aristotle taught him that a great king must not only conquer, he must understand. It was one of the most important mentorships in human history. As Aristotle taught in Mysa, something amazing was happening behind the scenes. His ideas were spreading. His notebooks were multiplying. His thoughts were evolving. He was no longer just a philosopher. He was becoming a force of nature, shaping the future with every word, every lesson, every scroll. And soon, the boy he taught would become a man. And that man would ride out to conquer the world. When Alexander finished his education, he began his conquest. And Aristotle? He returned to Athens, older, wiser, more famous than ever. He was no longer the rejected student. He was now the teacher of the world's most powerful man. This time, Athens welcomed him. He opened his own school, the Lyceum, a place that was different from Plato's academy. Here he walked with his students, spoke while moving, asked endless questions, and taught everything from logic to literature, science to soul, nature to nations. His students were called peripatetics, those who walk around. In this school, Aristotle didn't just teach. He created an intellectual movement. He began writing everything: politics, ethics, poetics, metaphysics, rhetoric, on the soul, history of animals, and hundreds more works. He wasn't just trying to be clever. He was trying to capture all human knowledge in one lifetime. He believed everything is connected. If we understand one thing deeply, we can understand everything. He created systems, definitions, categories. He said, logic is the tool for truth. Ethics is the path to happiness. Politics is the art of living together. Poetry is the mirror of emotion. Biology is the study of life itself. He believed in balance, in purpose, in observation, in discipline, in asking, what is this thing? What is its purpose? What makes it excellent? That's how he studied everything, from frogs to stars to kings to plays to human pain. Where we stand now. Aristotle is now in Athens. He has a school, he has students, he has ideas, and he has influence across the world thanks to Alexander's growing empire. Part 2. Power, Politics, and the Price of Wisdom. The world was changing, fast. Aristotle, now in his 40s and 50s, had become the most respected thinker on the planet. He was teaching at the Lyceum in Athens, writing furiously, and gathering students from all over the Greek world. His philosophy was no longer just theory. It was influencing real power. Because somewhere far from Athens, his former student, Alexander of Macedonia, was marching across the world like a storm. By now, Alexander had already defeated the Persian Empire, taken Egypt, reached the heart of Asia, become the ruler of the largest empire in history. And everywhere Alexander went, Greek ideas followed, especially Aristotle's. He sent plants, animals, maps, and cultural observations back to Aristotle in Athens. He opened libraries. He promoted education. He carried the Iliad, annotated by Aristotle, wherever he went. Aristotle wasn't riding horses into war, but make no mistake, his mind was riding beside Alexander, shaping the empire from the shadows. And the people of Athens knew it. That's why, for a time, they tolerated Aristotle's presence. Even though Aristotle was not Athenian by birth, and even though he had once been rejected by the academy, now, he had power, not through soldiers, but through ideas. In the Lyceum, Aristotle wasn't just giving lectures. He was building a machine of knowledge. He created a structured system to study ethics, politics, biology, psychology, astronomy, economics, drama, logic, education, memory, emotion, dreams, philosophy of war, philosophy of friendship, philosophy of everything. He didn't treat subjects as separate. He believed everything was interconnected. He trained his students to observe the real world, measure things, analyze things, question everything. They gathered laws from hundreds of city-states to write the first political science encyclopedia. They collected data about animals, diseases, cities, rituals, theater plays. Everything was studied, labeled, and discussed. And while Plato's philosophy was poetic and mysterious, Aristotle's was sharp, logical, and built for the real world. His writing was not beautiful. In fact, it was dry and technical, but it was clear, honest, and structured like a blueprint of human knowledge. And that's what made it last for over 2,000 years. But not everyone was happy. Aristotle's power made enemies. Many Athenians never forgot that he wasn't born in Athens. They never forgot that his student, Alexander, was a Macedonian conqueror. To them, Aristotle wasn't a Greek hero. He was a symbol of outside influence. They didn't see a teacher. They saw a threat. And when Alexander began ruling more harshly, executing opponents, and declaring himself a god, Aristotle's name became dangerous to speak in public. People whispered, "Is Aristotle advising Alexander? Does he support tyranny? Is he loyal to Athens or to the empire?" None of this was true. Aristotle didn't want power. He wanted understanding. But public opinion is not logical. And slowly, the ground under Aristotle's feet began to crack. Then came the news that would change everything. In 323 BC, Alexander the Great died suddenly in Babylon. He was only 32 years old. The cause? Nobody knows for sure. Some say fever, some say poisoning, some say fate. But one thing was certain. The empire he built in 12 years began to collapse overnight. Chaos erupted. In Athens, the people celebrated Alexander's death. To them, it was the fall of a tyrant and a chance to take back their freedom. But they didn't just celebrate Alexander's death. They also went after his ideas, his allies, and his teacher. The same city that had killed Socrates for corrupting the youth now turned on Aristotle, accusing him of impiety, of disrespecting the gods, of spreading dangerous ideas. Was he guilty? No. But in ancient Athens, logic didn't protect you. Powerful minds were feared. Philosophers were seen as threats. And the mob didn't care about truth. The same pattern was repeating again. Aristotle saw it clearly. He once wrote, "When democracy is ignorant, even wisdom becomes a crime." So instead of defending himself, Aristotle quietly fled the city. He's said to have told his friends, "I will not allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy." The first sin was killing Socrates. The second would have been killing him. And so he left. Aristotle returned to Chalcis, a city on the island of Euboea, where his mother had once lived. He was in his 60s now. He had no school, no students, no platform, just his books, his notes, and his thoughts. His wife Pythias had died long ago. He now lived with Herpyllis, a woman he cared for deeply, and with their son Nicomachus, named after his father. He continued writing. Even in exile, he couldn't stop thinking. His mind, even as his body weakened, kept working like a living universe. He wrote about aging, about memory, about the soul, about how everything has a cause, a purpose, and a final form. He called it the unmoved mover, the thing behind all things, a force beyond time, beyond change, beyond us. It was his quiet version of God, not a man with a beard, but a perfect mind holding the order of the world together. He was now far from the city that once celebrated him and then betrayed him. He lived in quiet exile in Chalcis, an island city, with a heavy heart but an unstoppable mind. His name was no longer shouted in the streets of Athens. No more eager students gathered in the shaded paths of the Lyceum. No messengers from royal palaces. No crowds. No noise. No applause. But inside his home, inside his private world, something was still burning. Because the world may forget you, But when you carry the universe inside your head, you still have something to give. Each morning, Aristotle woke up early. He didn't have servants rushing around or large halls filled with scrolls anymore. But on his small table, he kept stacks of parchment, pens made from reeds, and small jars of black ink. His hands trembled more than before. His body was slower. But his mind? His mind was still awake. He sat down. He dipped his pen, and he began to write. Again. One sentence, then another, and another, day after day, year after year, because he had one final mission now, to make sure that the truth outlives him. In these final years, Aristotle didn't focus on fame or legacy. He focused on first principles, the deepest, most fundamental questions. What is existence? What causes something to exist? What is the purpose of everything that exists? Is there a meaning behind the universe? What is the soul? What is the human being? This is where he wrote his most difficult and abstract work, Metaphysics. In it, he explored ideas that no one had ever dared to put into logical form before. The nature of being, the structure of reality, the idea of an unmoved mover, something that causes all motion but is not moved by anything. A divine intelligence that is pure thought, not like a god in temples, but something deeper, invisible, eternal. He wasn't trying to please anyone. He wasn't trying to be popular. He wasn't trying to impress kings or scholars. He was simply trying to explain the invisible architecture of the universe. And he did it. Alone. During these years in exile, Aristotle was not completely alone. He lived with Herpyllis, a woman who had been with him since his time in Athens, and their young son, Nicomachus. This boy was the last person who carried not only Aristotle's blood, but also his potential, his possibility, his hope. Aristotle loved his son deeply. He spoke gently to him, told him stories, shared his thoughts. The way a philosopher speaks to a student, but with the warmth of a father speaking to his own child. And so, when he began writing a new work about morality and the purpose of life, he titled it Nicomachean Ethics. Not because it was written for Nicomachus, not because it was about him, but because in that name, Aristotle placed his heart, a father trying to leave behind not gold or buildings, but wisdom. In this book, he explained what it means to live a good life, why pleasure is not the highest goal, why virtue matters, why real happiness comes from balance, character, and purpose. He wrote, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." It became one of the most important books ever written about how to live. And it came from a man who was watching his own life slowly come to a close. The seasons passed. Winters became longer. Summers became shorter. Aristotle's legs grew weaker. His eyesight dimmed. He still tried to write, even when his fingers cramped. He still whispered questions to himself, still argued with ideas inside his own mind. But the man who had once taught kings, who had classified the animals of the earth, who had mapped the stars with nothing but logic, who had built schools, shaped science, and named philosophy itself, now walked slowly through his garden, or sat silently, watching the wind move the trees. And sometimes you could see tears in his eyes, not because he was afraid of death, but because he knew something very painful. Everything I've written could disappear. At that time, there were no printing presses, no digital libraries, no hard drives, no cloud storage. Every word he wrote was on fragile scrolls, made of thin, dry material, easily destroyed by fire, water, or time. He had written hundreds of works, some say over 200, but he knew if just one generation fails to copy them, they could vanish from history. This fear haunted him. He didn't want statues. He didn't want temples in his name. He only wanted one thing: let the knowledge survive, even if I don't. When Aristotle knew the end was near, he wrote a will. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was simple, logical, thoughtful. He asked that Herpyllis be treated with honor and given a home, that Nicomachus be educated well and taken care of, that his servants be freed and given dignity, that his body be buried beside Pythias, his first wife. No monuments, no grand ceremony, just a clean ending to a life of deep thought. He lived for truth, not attention, and that's how he wanted to leave. Aristotle died in 322 BC, 1 year after Alexander. He was around 62 years old, but after he died, most of his works were lost. His students tried to preserve them, but the political chaos of the time scattered his scrolls. For almost 200 years, his teachings were hidden, stored away in dusty basements, forgotten by the world. It wasn't until centuries later, in the Roman era and again in the Islamic Golden Age, that some of his works were rediscovered, translated, and brought back to life. If just a few accidents had happened differently, we might have never heard the name Aristotle at all. Some works were passed from teacher to student in secret. But most of the world? They forgot him. Within just a few decades, his name disappeared from the public voice. People no longer quoted Aristotle. His teachings were no longer taught in schools. Other philosophers rose up with different ideas, louder voices, more influence. Rome was rising, Greece was weakening. And slowly, across the ancient world, the scrolls of Aristotle vanished. The empire that once spread his ideas was gone. The kings he taught were dead. The school he built was silent. The fire was out. For nearly 200 years, the world acted as if Aristotle had never existed. In a small village, in the dusty cellar of a scholar's home, a collection of scrolls, dry and fragile, sat in silence. They were covered in dust, their ink fading, their language too difficult for most people to understand. But they were there. And one day in the city of Skepsis in Asia Minor, a man named Apellicon, a rich book collector and lover of philosophy, heard rumors of these scrolls. He traveled to the village. He paid large sums of money. And finally, he saw them with his own eyes. The lost works of Aristotle. Hundreds of scrolls, damaged, dirty, scattered, but still intact. He didn't understand everything he read, but he knew these were not ordinary writings. He packed them carefully, and he took them back to Athens. And once again, after nearly 200 years, Aristotle returned to his city. As the Roman Empire grew, it absorbed the culture of Greece. Roman leaders, soldiers, and scholars all respected Greek philosophy. But most of them followed Stoicism or Epicureanism, not Aristotle. Until one Roman general, Sulla, raided Athens and captured Apellicon's library. He took the scrolls of Aristotle back to Rome. There, a young and brilliant scholar named Andronicus of Rhodes discovered them. He didn't just read the scrolls. He organized them. He edited them. He sorted them into categories: logic, ethics, politics, science, metaphysics. He turned the mess into a system. He created what we now call the Organon, Aristotle's system of logic, the Nicomachean ethics, his ideas on how to live, the politics, how humans should live together, the poetics, how art and drama should reflect human truth. Metaphysics, the study of being, reality, and cause. De anima, the study of the soul, the history of animals, the birth of biology. These were not just books. These were the intellectual skeleton of human civilization, and they were almost lost forever. Hundreds of years later, in the heart of the Islamic world, something incredible happened. In cities like Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo, scholars began collecting and translating the ancient texts of Greece. They didn't just translate them. They studied them deeply, debated them, and built new systems on top of them. Aristotle became the most respected name in Islamic philosophy. Thinkers like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, Averroes, Ibn Rushd, Al-Farabi, they all studied Aristotle. They called him the first teacher. His writings on logic, ethics, medicine, and astronomy were used in universities across the Islamic world. And it was through their translations that Aristotle eventually reached medieval Europe. By the 12th and 13th centuries, Europe was emerging from the Dark Ages. Christian scholars, especially in universities like Paris, began to rediscover Aristotle through Arabic translations, later retranslated into Latin. At first, the church was suspicious. Aristotle wasn't Christian. He didn't speak of the Bible or God. But one brilliant theologian, Thomas Aquinas, saw something deeper. He believed Aristotle's logic and philosophy could help explain Christian theology in a rational way. He combined faith and reason, and in doing so, he made Aristotle the foundation of European thought. For the next 600 years, students in Europe studied Aristotle's logic to learn how to argue, his ethics to learn how to live, his politics to understand society, his biology to explore nature, his metaphysics to seek God. When modern universities were created in Europe, in cities like Bologna, Paris, Oxford, and Cambridge, their curriculum was built around Aristotle's works. Even scientists like Galileo, Kepler, and Newton, who disagreed with parts of Aristotle's science, still used his method of observation, logic, and reason. Even modern logic, computer science, and artificial intelligence have roots in Aristotle's original system of classification and reasoning. His influence became so large, so deep, so foundational, that people stopped even noticing it. He became the heir of Western thinking, invisible, but always present. Think about this. Aristotle lived before Jesus Christ, the Roman Empire, the invention of paper, the birth of Islam, the discovery of electricity, the invention of the telescope, the building of modern cities, the rise of democracy, the fall of monarchies, the internet, artificial intelligence, you, me. And yet, 2,300 years later, we are still asking his questions, reading his ideas, studying his logic, debating his ethics, building systems on his foundation. Aristotle never raised an army. He never ruled a nation. He didn't own land. He didn't command wealth. He died in exile, mostly forgotten. He was nearly erased from history. And yet, he won. Not with power, not with violence, not with status, but with thought. He didn't conquer cities. He conquered ignorance. He didn't build empires of land. He built an empire of reason. And today, whether we realize it or not, we all live in a world that Aristotle helped build. Part 4. The Philosopher Who Became Time. His final gift to the world. His name lives. His words live. His mind lives. His questions live. And through them, we live better. But how? How did a man, who was nearly erased from history, become the intellectual father of nearly everything we call modern? Let's answer this, one last time, by stepping deep into what Aristotle left behind. Aristotle did not just teach students, he taught generations. His questions were so deep, so eternal, that every new generation found themselves staring at the same mysteries. What is a good life? What is truth? What is happiness? What is the soul? What is justice? How should society work? Why are we here? And the reason we still read him today is simple. He never told people what to think. He taught them how to think. He didn't give you the answer. He gave you the tools to find it for yourself. And that's why his teachings feel fresh even today. Not like old knowledge, but like a mirror to modern life. Let's now understand his most important teachings, explained in the easiest possible way so everyone, even beginners, can understand and feel what he meant. What is the meaning of life? Aristotle said, "Everything has a purpose. The purpose of a knife is to cut. The purpose of a seed is to grow into a tree. And the purpose of human life is to become the best version of yourself." He believed the goal of life is not just to be rich, famous, or powerful, but to live in a way that matches your potential. In Greek, he called it eudaimonia, a word bigger than happiness. It means a life that is full, meaningful, balanced, excellent, and honest. What is real happiness? He said, "Real happiness does not come from pleasure or from money. It comes from virtue, being brave, kind, wise, disciplined, fair." He taught that we must practice good actions like we practice a sport. You become good by doing good, not by dreaming about it. Just like muscles grow with repetition, your character grows with repetition. What makes someone great? Aristotle did not believe greatness comes from birth or background. He said, "You are what you repeatedly do." That means, if you lie every day, you become a liar. If you speak the truth every day, you become an honest person. If you study every day, you become wise. If you ignore your talents every day, you lose them. Greatness is not luck. It is habit. What is the best way to live? He believed in the golden mean, the middle path between extremes. Not too much, not too little, not cowardly, not reckless, but courageous. Not lazy, not obsessed, but disciplined. Not silent, not rude, but honest. He believed that a good life is lived with balance. And that's what brings peace. What is the soul? He said, "The soul is not a ghost inside you. It is your form, your shape, your actions, your choices. It is what makes you, you." For Aristotle, the soul wasn't a floating spirit. It was your living potential. It was not what you feel. It was what you do with your life. If you live with virtue, your soul is strong. If you live with lies, your soul weakens. What is the role of government? He believed that society should help people become their best selves. He didn't believe in total freedom. He didn't believe in total control. He believed in justice, where citizens and leaders both follow reason. For him, politics was not about power. It was about education, fairness, duty, and growth. What makes us human? Logic, language, memory, purpose. He said, "Humans are not just animals. We are the only ones who ask, what is right? What is wrong? What is my role in this world?" That's what made Aristotle special. He never stopped asking those questions, and he never stopped helping others ask them too. Why his story should be told today. Loudly, proudly, endlessly, because we live in a world that is filled with noise, is addicted to attention, is obsessed with opinions, is always in a hurry, forgets the past, glorifies fame over wisdom. And in that world, Aristotle is a lighthouse. He reminds us that quiet thinking is powerful. Truth needs patience. Growth takes time. Knowledge matters. Discipline is freedom. Greatness is not in birth, but in action. He reminds us that even if the world forgets you, if your work is honest and your words are clear and your intent is pure, you will live forever in the minds of those who are still learning to think. This video, this story, this language is not just about a philosopher. It's about you, because every sentence here helps you. Listen to real, beautiful English. Understand powerful ideas in simple words. Practice how to think and speak better. Build your fluency with real storytelling. Feel motivation while learning new vocabulary. Discover the power of speaking slowly, clearly, and deeply. Aristotle didn't speak English, but the best way to learn English is by listening to real stories about real people with real meaning. And if you understood this story today, congratulations, you are already growing. 2,300 years ago, a boy sat under the stars and wondered, why does the world exist? What is my purpose? How can I live well? And how can I help others do the same? His name was Aristotle. He never knew the internet, never imagined airplanes, never saw skyscrapers, microphones, satellites, or smartphones. He lived in a world of scrolls, sandals, sun, war, silence, exile. And yet, he shaped our entire way of thinking. His body turned to dust. But his mind? His mind became time-proof. This is not just the end of a story. It's the beginning of a mindset that says, ask more questions, think deeper, practice virtue, become better each day, learn something new every moment, live with reason, love, balance, and purpose. That is what Aristotle would want you to do. That is the real legacy of a man who was once nearly forgotten, but now teaches the whole world again, including you. Now it's your turn. Read, listen, learn, question, grow, speak, change, and one day, inspire. Thank you for watching this story. This video was not just made to teach you English. It was made to teach you how to think, how to grow, and how to become someone the world never forgets. And if this story touched you, if you learned something new today, if you felt something powerful in your heart, then do one thing right now. Subscribe to the channel, because we're just getting started. And the next story might change your life even more than this one did. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and never stop thinking.